Hi guys! Tonight we're going to read one of Aesop's fables. And so this one is about the north wind and the sun and a brooding competition between the two of us. So at the end of it, we're going to see which one really is stronger, the sun or the wind. The north wind and the sun. One day in late spring, with the sun shining strong, she announced to the north wind, "You do not belong. It's time you must leave so things can get hot." But the north wind simply said, "Oh, no, I will not." The north wind sat high on his wind machine and asked the sun, "Who made you the queen?" She replied, "This is just the natural way, so take off and leave, for you cannot stay." But the north wind said, "You think you're so great, but you're not allowed to choose my fate. Since you say now that I can't stay longer, let's have a contest to see who's stronger." He leapt aboard, turned on the fan. "Watch me now as I do all I can. You might be bright, you may be old, but I'm the one who brings the cold." The trees all trembled in his breeze as waves grew higher on the seas. "See," the north wind asked the sun, "and I'll do more before day's done." The sun had not yet said a word, and then she chuckled. "How absurd! You may have power, may have might, but there is strength in burning light, in bringing light." "Never!" he cried. "I cannot lose. So here's a bet I hope you'll choose. Whoever makes that man undress will be the winner, nothing less." The sun first laughed, then she agreed. But which one of them would now succeed? Which one would have the better chance to make the man remove his pants? The north wind said, "It's my turn first, as foul weather soon will burst." Keeping that small man in sight, he began to blow with all his might. The man was very much amazed. He began to shiver, feeling dazed. His day had gone from fine to bad, never guessing the bet they'd had. The north wind blew with all his force, a breeze that could blow down a horse. The man tugged at his too light shirt to guard himself from blowing dirt. But that north wind felt such rage for this was war he'd come to wage. He thought that he would blow his best, but then the man pulled out a vest. And so the wind blew harder still. "I have to win. I will. I will. I'll make him take off his clothing off." But he put on a scarf so he wouldn't cough. The wind whipped in fury, showing his might, but the man found a jacket hidden from sight. The wind blew harder, even more, but found he couldn't settle the score. The north wind sat on a cloud then to rest. "Oh," said the sun, "so you think you're the best. Well, it's my turn to show my power. This shouldn't take longer than an hour." The sun set sail towards the man who'd shivered since their game began. She spread her lovely gentle heat, her golden rays whose touch was sweet. The man smiled, warm at last, happy that the storm had passed. Pulled off the vest like in a dream. "Perhaps I'll buy some cool ice cream." The sun kept smiling, shining down, her yellow rays spread like a crown. With hours to go before she'd set, the man had just begun to sweat. It really wasn't hard at all, so the north wind was sure to fall. With love and joy, she warmed the land, till the man took off his coat with one hand. The sun was glowing now much warmer than it was before. Maybe he'd go to the sea from this spot. So he undid his shirt, for he felt much too hot. He walked so far till he reached the sand. "What weather we're having in this land! What a strange day, but now he could swim." So he pulled off his clothes, leaving only him. "You won," said Wind to the sun in shame, saddened to see that he'd lost the game. The sun was gracious and shook his hand, knowing the north wind would now understand. The north wind drove off in his wind machine, thought about how things might have been. He'd started so full of anger and pride, but lost to the sun with her warmth inside. For strength isn't always the best way to win. Sometimes we must use the joy that's within. By sharing a sweet and loving fire, we can earn our heart's desire. Yay. Okay. And this next one is Help, the wolf is coming. And it's another one of Aesop's, based on Aesop's fables. So at the end, we'll talk about a little bit about Aesop's fables. The high price of telling lies. Help, the wolf is coming. Many years ago, in a land so far away, lived a shepherd family who worked hard every day. Among mountains so high and hillsides so steep, their 3 older sons all took care of the sheep. The 3 older brothers had flocks of their own, but the youngest one still had to wait till he'd grown. He wished to grow big like his brothers, so strong, so he'd have his own sheep before very long. Let's see something. The brothers would tell him his life was so easy, playing in the hills and the valleys so breezy. They knew he'd be busy soon watching his flock, and then there'd be no time to laugh or to talk. For there in the mountains so quiet and still lurked a grave danger behind every hill. There the shepherds knew they could never relax, lest the enemies strike when they'd turn their backs. Oh, look at the wolves. There lurked wolves so hungry, just waiting to strike, if some lazy shepherd took off on a hike. They hid in the forest, stood behind trees, sniffing the smell of the sheep on the breeze. Oh my goodness. The sheep are so scared. If one saw a wolf, he would raise a great shout. Help! Help! It's a wolf! He'd scream and cry out. Then they'd all band together as quick as you please to chase those bad wolves back up to the trees. Well, after some time, the great day came at last. The boy had grown up, and his childhood passed. His father said, Son, you will be on your own, with your very own flock, now that you're fully grown. That night he could barely sleep in his bed as thoughts of his own sheep raced round his head. In the morning he left for the fields near their farm, and his brother said, If you need us, just call an alarm. He chose a nice field where the sheep could all graze, and stood there so proudly, a glint in his gaze. He watched the birds fly past, he watched the bright flowers, but he began to grow bored just after a few hours. How long he had dreamed for this day he had planned. Who knew it would turn out so boring and bland? He'd hoped for adventure, a challenge, fresh air. But all the sheep did was just eat grass and stare. At last, when he could stand there no more, he figured out how to get rid of the bore. Help! Help! A wolf! He cried from the top of the hill, and his brothers' red faces appeared. What a thrill! They were panting from running, they were all out of breath, and their faces were red like he'd scared them to death. Ha ha, he laughed loud. Look at all of you run. But the brothers all scolded. Don't do that for fun. But the trick had been so fun, he couldn't resist, and he was so bored there, his staff held in his fist. So at last he knew he would try it again, climbed up high and shouted, "Help me!" So plain. Again they all came, panting and red in the face. "Ha ha!" the young man laughed. "What a funny race!" This time they were angrier still, said they'd tell their dad about his rude game. Yes, all three were that mad. But that night they were tired after how they'd been scared, so the young man went to bed, grateful to be spared. They didn't tell their father, so he didn't have to pay for the little game he played on them that day. A few more days passed in boredom and peace, counting the sheep and stroking their soft fleece. He thought perhaps he'd try his little trick for show, but then he climbed up the hill and saw a wolf below. "Help, help, a wolf!" he cried, terror in his tone. But no matter how he yelled, he still remained alone. The brothers heard his cries, you see, but thought it was a game. They feared if they came running, it would all turn out the same. "Help!" he called. "There's a wolf after me!" But his brothers all figured they knew what they'd see. The brothers stood and smiled as their flocks grazed around, hoping he would someday learn to grow up and calm down. "It's not a joke," the young man cried. "The wolf is really here." But all his brothers shook their head without a trace of fear. The wolf came close, although he tried to chase it far away. He found himself in battle now, for real and not for play. His brothers would not come, he knew, to fight there at his side. So he stood alone and fought, or at least he really tried. The young man fought like a hero, alone, striking the wolf with rocks he had thrown. And after an hour of fighting, the wolf departed. With two of his sheep, he saw broken-hearted. Oh no, the wolf got two of his sheep. That young man sure learned his lesson that day, even if he'd had to learn it the hard way. Never cry for help if that isn't what you need. If you want to be believed, then you must not mislead. I'm sure the moral of this tale is very, very clear. Don't cry wolf unless you see a wolf is coming near. The truth is precious, so we must never lie to earn our trust. The high price of telling lies. Well, those are two very interesting lessons that we learned. So Aesop's fables, they are tales from long, long ago that use characters, and sometimes they make some mistakes, but it helps us learn some really good lessons along the way. So the first one, we were talking about the north wind and the sun. There are times that we may think that we're stronger and we use our power, if we have any, to try to get what we want. Oftentimes we see that in bullies. Have you ever seen a bully? Like a bully at school? Somebody that is possibly bigger than the other kids, and so they may push people around or say mean things to try to get what they want. And really, if you want people to do what you want, sometimes you just need to say please and thank you and use a gentle spirit and a kind heart. And a lot of times that will win a lot more friends and a lot more battles or stop battles before they even start. So the next one was about the boy that cried wolf and about the danger in telling lies. So sometimes the only thing we have is the trust that people earn, the trust that we earn from people, and that's really important. And so your trust and your word, so that people can believe you when you tell them what's going on. So we always want to be believed. We never want to have anybody that will doubt us. So it's important to tell the truth. And sometimes that's easier said than done, because it's hard to tell the truth and maybe it might get us in trouble or get somebody else in trouble. But you'll never get in trouble for telling the truth. So I hope you learned your lessons through watching the story about the North Wind and the Sun and the boy that cried wolf. I love you all. Have a great evening.